German Shepherd was trapped in the jungle vines. What baby did next left everyone in tears. What you're about to hear will shake you to your core. This story of a 5-year-old boy and a dying German Shepherd will make you believe in miracles again. Don't forget to like, share, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. The morning mist hung thick over the Kerala jungle when everything changed for the Kumar family. Raj Kumar gripped the steering wheel of their rented car tighter as they wound through the narrow mountain road. His wife Priya sat beside him, checking her phone one last time before they lost signal completely. In the back seat, their 5-year-old son, Arjun, pressed his small face against the window, his breath fogging up the glass. "Are we almost there, Papa?" Arjun asked, his voice carrying an unusual quietness that had worried his parents for the past few weeks. "Just 10 more minutes, Beta," Raj replied, glancing at his son through the rearview mirror. The boy had been different lately, quieter, more observant. Sometimes Raj would catch him staring at nothing, his head tilted like he was listening to something only he could hear. The Green Paradise Eco Resort appeared through the trees like something from a fairy tale. Wooden cottages on stilts dotted the hillside, connected by rope bridges that swayed gently in the morning breeze. The main building was constructed entirely from bamboo and recycled materials, its thatched roof blending perfectly with the surrounding jungle canopy. "Look at this place," Priya whispered, her earlier skepticism about choosing such a remote location melting away. "It's beautiful." They pulled into the small parking area where a tall man in his 50s waited for them. His weathered face broke into a warm smile, though Raj noticed his eyes kept darting toward the jungle line with something that looked like concern. "Welcome to Green Paradise," the man said, helping them with their luggage. "I'm Thomas, the owner. You must be the Kumar family from Mumbai." "Yes, that's us," Raj said, shaking his hand. "Thank you for accommodating us on such short notice." Thomas's smile faltered slightly. "Of course. Though I should mention we've had some unusual activity in the jungle lately. Nothing dangerous, but I recommend staying within the resort boundaries, especially for the little one." Arjun had wandered a few steps away, standing perfectly still near the edge of the parking area. His small hands were clenched at his sides, and his eyes were closed. "Arjun!" Priya called, moving toward him. "What are you doing, sweetheart?" The boy's eyes snapped open, and he looked at his mother with an expression that seemed far too serious for a 5-year-old. "The trees are crying, Mama." Thomas dropped the suitcase he was holding. It hit the ground with a dull thud that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "What did he say?" "He's just tired from the journey," Raj said quickly, scooping Arjun up in his arms. "Long drive from Mumbai." But Thomas was staring at Arjun with a mixture of fear and fascination. "The trees are crying," he repeated softly. "My grandmother used to say the same thing. Said some children could hear what the jungle was really saying." "That's just local superstition," Priya said, though her voice wavered slightly. Thomas picked up the dropped suitcase, his movements slow and deliberate. "Perhaps. But in the last month, we've had 3 dogs go missing from nearby villages. Found one of them last week, tangled in vines so thick it looked like the jungle itself had trapped it. The poor creature didn't survive." Arjun squirmed in his father's arms. "Put me down, Papa." As soon as his feet touched the ground, the boy walked straight to Thomas and looked up at him with those too serious eyes. The dogs didn't run away. Someone made them disappear. The resort owner's face went pale. "How could you possibly know that?" "I don't know," Arjun said simply. "I just do." Their cottage was the furthest from the main building, nestled against the jungle edge with a spectacular view of the valley below. As they unpacked, Priya kept glancing at her son, who had positioned himself by the window overlooking the dense forest. "Raj," she whispered, pulling her husband into the small kitchen area. "Something's not right with Arjun. These things he's been saying lately." "He's just imaginative," Raj said, but his conviction sounded forced. "Remember when he told us about Mrs. Sharma's cat being sick? That was just coincidence. The cat died 2 days later, Raj. And what about when he knew your mother was going to call before the phone rang? Or when he found that injured pigeon in the park when we weren't even looking for it?" Raj ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he made when stressed. "What are you suggesting?" That our son is... what? Psychic? I don't know what I'm suggesting. I just know something's different about him, and it started about 2 months ago. They were interrupted by Arjun calling from the main room. "Mama, Papa, come look!" They found him pointing out the window at a family of langur monkeys sitting in the trees just beyond their balcony. The monkeys were unusually still, all facing the cottage, their eyes fixed on Arjun. "They're watching me," Arjun said matter-of-factly. "They want to know if I'm the one who can help." "Help with what, Beta?" Raj asked, kneeling beside his son. Arjun turned to look at his father, and for a moment, Raj could have sworn his son's brown eyes held flecks of gold that hadn't been there before. "I don't know yet. But something bad is happening in the jungle, something that makes all the animals scared. That first night at the resort, the Kumar family tried to maintain normalcy. They had dinner at the main lodge, where Thomas introduced them to the other guests, a young honeymoon couple from Delhi, and an elderly British woman named Margaret, who was documenting local bird species. "You must be very brave, staying so close to the jungle," Margaret said to Arjun, her eyes twinkling behind thick glasses. "All sorts of wild creatures out there." "They're not wild," Arjun said, carefully cutting his chapati. "They're just scared of people because people hurt them." Margaret leaned forward with interest. "And how would you know that, young man?" Arjun shrugged. "I can feel it, like when you're sad but trying to smile. The animals do that too, but with their whole bodies." The old woman exchanged a meaningful look with Thomas, who had been hovering nearby. "Remarkable," she murmured. "In all my years studying animal behavior, I've rarely heard such insight from someone so young." After dinner, they returned to their cottage. Raj and Priya tucked Arjun into his small bed in the adjoining room, but the boy seemed restless, his eyes constantly drifting to the window. "Try to sleep, Beta," Priya said, smoothing his hair. "We have a big day tomorrow. Thomas said he'd take us on a nature walk." "Mama," Arjun said suddenly, gripping her hand, "if someone was hurt and calling for help, we'd help them, right?" "Of course we would," Priya said, confused by the question. "Even if it was dangerous." Raj sat on the edge of the bed. "We'd be careful, but yes, we'd try to help." "Why are you asking this?" Arjun's eyes filled with tears. "Because someone is calling for help. They've been calling all day, but they're getting weaker. I think they're dying." "Who's calling for help?" Priya asked, alarmed. "I don't know their name. But they're so scared, Mama, so scared and alone." Raj and Priya stayed with him until he finally fell asleep, his small face still creased with worry even in slumber. They retreated to their own room, speaking in hushed whispers. "We should leave," Priya said. "This place is affecting him somehow." "We just got here," Raj protested, "and you saw how happy he was when we arrived. Maybe this is good for him. Maybe being in nature will help with whatever this is." "Whatever this is?" "Raj, our son, is claiming he can hear someone calling for help. What if he tries to go into the jungle? We'll watch him carefully. Lock the doors at night. It'll be fine." But even as he said it, Raj felt a chill run down his spine. Outside, the jungle had gone completely silent. No insects chirping, no birds calling, no rustle of leaves. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. At 3 a.m, Raj woke to find Priya shaking him urgently. "Arjun's not in his bed." They searched the small cottage frantically, checking the bathroom, the kitchen, behind furniture. The front door was still locked from the inside, but the window in Arjun's room was open, the curtains billowing in the pre-dawn breeze. "He couldn't have," Priya gasped. "It's too high for him to climb down." But when they looked closer, they saw small handprints on the windowsill and marks on the wooden exterior where tiny feet had found purchase. Their 5-year-old son had somehow climbed down from the 2nd story and disappeared into the jungle. "Get Thomas," Raj said, already pulling on his shoes. "I'm going after him." "You can't go alone." "Get Thomas," Raj repeated, grabbing a flashlight. "And call the police if I'm not back in 30 minutes. He climbed out the same window Arjun had used, his heart pounding as he dropped to the soft ground below. The jungle loomed before him, dark and impenetrable. How could a 5-year-old child navigate this? Then he saw them, small footprints in the dew-wet earth, leading directly into the forest. But what made his blood run cold was that the footprints seemed to follow a perfectly straight line, as if Arjun knew exactly where he was going. Raj plunged into the jungle, following the trail. Branches caught at his clothes, and unseen things scurried away from his flashlight beam. He called Arjun's name, but the forest seemed to swallow his voice. The footprints led deeper and deeper into the wilderness, through passages that seemed impossible for a child to navigate. Several times, Raj had to push through thick vegetation that showed signs of recent disturbance, broken twigs at a height that matched Arjun's passage. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, Raj heard something that made him stop in his tracks. It was Arjun's voice, clear and calm, speaking as if in conversation. "I know it hurts, but you have to let me help you. Please, you have to trust me." Raj pushed through a curtain of hanging vines and froze at what he saw. In a small clearing lit by the first rays of dawn filtering through the canopy, Arjun knelt beside a massive German shepherd. The dog was entangled in a web of thick vines that wrapped around its body like serpents. Some of the vines had thorns that had pierced the animal's skin, and blood matted its golden-brown fur. But what stopped Raj's breath wasn't just the sight of his tiny son with such a large, potentially dangerous animal. It was the way Arjun's hands moved with impossible precision, untangling vines that looked like they'd been deliberately wrapped and knotted. And the dog, despite what must have been excruciating pain, lay perfectly still, its intelligent brown eyes fixed on Arjun's face with absolute trust. "Arjun," Raj whispered, not wanting to startle either of them. His son looked up, and there were tears streaming down his face. "Papa, someone did this on purpose. These vines, they're not natural. Someone tied Thor up to die." "Thor? How do you know his name?" "He told me," Arjun said simply, turning back to his work. "Not with words, with pictures in my head. He showed me his home, his family, the bad men who took him." Raj approached slowly, his rational mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The vines were indeed arranged in a deliberate pattern, some sort of trap or restraint. No animal could have gotten tangled like this, naturally. "We need to get help," Raj said. "This dog needs a vet." "No time," Arjun said, his small fingers working at a particularly tight knot near the dog's throat. "This one is cutting off his breathing. If I don't get it off now, he'll die." As if understanding the conversation, Thor whimpered softly, his tail giving a weak thump against the ground. Raj watched in amazement as his 5-year-old son worked with the focus and skill of someone far older, carefully loosening vines without causing more damage to the already injured animal. "There!" Arjun suddenly exclaimed as the vine around Thor's neck came free. The dog took a deep, shuddering breath, his whole body seeming to relax. That's when they heard the voices. Men's voices, coming from the direction they'd arrived. But these weren't the concerned calls of a search party. They were angry, purposeful. "The trap was here," one voice said. "The dog can't have gone far." "Boss wants it dead," another replied. "No witnesses to the operation." Thor's ears flattened against his head, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Arjun placed a gentle hand on the dog's head, and amazingly, the growling stopped. "Papa," Arjun whispered, "we have to hide. These are the bad men Thor showed me." Raj didn't question how his son knew this. He grabbed Arjun and helped him support Thor's weight as they moved deeper into the undergrowth. They pressed themselves behind a massive tree trunk, just as 2 men entered the clearing. Both men wore forest department uniforms, but something about them seemed wrong. Their eyes were cold, calculating, and one carried a rifle that looked too modern, too military for a forest ranger. "Blood trail leads this way," the one with the rifle said. "The mutt's injured. Can't have gotten far." "I still don't understand why we couldn't just shoot it," the other complained. "Because gunshots attract attention, idiot. The vines make it look natural, like the dog got tangled and died. No one asked questions about a stray dying in the jungle. This one's not a stray, though. It's that ranger's dog, the one who's been sniffing around the operation. Exactly why it needs to disappear. Send a message to anyone else who thinks about investigating." Raj felt Arjun trembling against him, but when he looked down, he realized his son wasn't shaking with fear. He was shaking with anger. The boy's small fists were clenched, and his eyes held a fury that seemed impossible for a child. Thor must have sensed it too, because the dog pressed closer to Arjun, as if trying to calm him. That's when Raj noticed something extraordinary. Where Arjun's hand rested on Thor's fur, the dog's breathing had steadied. The panic in the animals' eyes had been replaced by determination. The men were getting closer, following the blood trail that would lead them right to their hiding spot. Raj's mind raced, trying to think of a way out. He couldn't fight two armed men, especially not with Arjun here. Then something unexpected happened. A langur monkey dropped from the trees directly in front of the men, screeching loudly. Then another, and another. Within seconds, a whole troop of monkeys had descended, creating chaos in the clearing. "What the hell?" one man shouted, trying to wave them off. The monkeys didn't attack, but they made it impossible for the men to follow the trail. They knocked leaves and debris around, obscuring the blood drops, while keeping up a cacophony of calls that echoed through the forest. "Forget it," the man with the rifle finally said. "The dog's probably dead anyway." Those vines were tight enough to cut circulation for hours. "Let's go before someone comes to investigate all this noise." The men retreated, their curses fading into the distance. The monkeys stayed for a few more moments, and Raj could have sworn one of them looked directly at Arjun and nodded before they all disappeared back into the canopy. "Did you—" Raj started, but couldn't finish the question. It was too impossible. "They wanted to help," Arjun said simply. "All the animals here know about the bad men. They're all scared." Before Raj could respond, they heard different voices calling through the forest. These were familiar. Thomas, Priya, and others from the resort. "Raj! Arjun! Where are you?" "Here!" Raj called back. "We're here! We need help!" Within minutes, the search party found them. Priya nearly collapsed with relief when she saw Arjun was safe, but her relief turned to shock when she saw Thor. "My God," Thomas breathed. "That's Ranger Krishnan's dog. He went missing 2 weeks ago. Krishnan's been searching everywhere." "We need to get him to a vet," Raj said. "He's badly injured." "I'll call Doctor Mira," Thomas said, already pulling out his phone. "She's the best veterinarian in the district. But first, how did you find him?" Arjun looked up at the adults surrounding him. "I heard him calling for help. He's been calling for 3 days, but no one else could hear him." Margaret, the elderly British woman, had joined the search party. She knelt beside Thor, examining the vine marks with scientific interest. "These patterns," she said slowly. "I've seen this before. These vines have been treated with something to make them stronger, more flexible. This is deliberate." "Who would do such a thing?" Priya asked, holding Arjun close. "Poachers," Margaret said grimly. "Or worse. There have been rumors of animal trafficking in these parts. Dogs like this one, trained forest dogs, they're valuable. But if they can't be captured or controlled, they're eliminated," Thomas finished, "especially if they belong to honest rangers who might interfere with illegal activities." They fashioned a makeshift stretcher from branches and jackets to carry Thor back to the resort. Arjun refused to leave the dog's side, keeping one small hand on Thor's head the entire way. What amazed everyone was how the dog, despite his pain and fear, remained calm under the child's. Touch Dr. Mira arrived within an hour, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and gentle hands. She set up a temporary treatment area in the resort's storage room, working quickly to assess Thor's injuries. "Multiple lacerations, possible fractured ribs, severe dehydration," she listed, her face grave. "But what worries me most is this." She pointed to a strange mark on Thor's neck, hidden beneath his fur. "This looks like an injection site. Someone drugged him before putting him in those vines." "To make him easier to handle," Raj suggested. "Or to make sure he couldn't fight back, Doctor," Mira said darkly. "This is a paralytic agent. It would have worn off by now, but when it was active, Thor would have been conscious but unable to move while they tied him up." Arjun, who had been quietly watching, suddenly spoke. "He remembers everything. The men in uniforms who weren't real rangers, the place where they took him first, the other animals in cages." Dr. Mira looked at the boy sharply. "What did you say about other animals?" "Thor saw them," Arjun said, his voice distant, as if recalling a memory that wasn't his own. "When the bad men caught him. They took him to a place with many cages, dogs, birds, even a leopard cub. They were all going to be sold." "That's impossible," Thomas said. "How could you know that?" But Dr. Mira was staring at Arjun with a different expression, not disbelief, but recognition. "You're connected to him, aren't you?" she said softly. "I've heard of this. My grandmother told stories of children who could speak with animals. She said it was a gift that appeared in times of great need. It's not speaking, Arjun corrected. It's feeling. I can feel what Thor feels, see what he remembers. And he can understand me the same way. To demonstrate, Arjun closed his eyes and placed both hands on Thor's injured body. The dog, who had been panting with pain, suddenly calmed. His breathing slowed and his muscles relaxed. His heart rate is dropping, Doctor, Mira said, checking her equipment. His stress levels are decreasing. This is remarkable. Can you help him remember more? Margaret asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming skepticism. About where he was taken? Arjun nodded, his eyes still closed. For several minutes he was silent, his face changing expressions as if watching a movie only he could see. When he finally opened his eyes, they were filled with tears. There's a building in the jungle, old, made of concrete. It used to be a ranger station, but now it's where they keep the animals. Thor remembers the way. He escaped when they opened his cage to give him another injection. He ran for hours, but the drug was already working. That's when they caught him again and put him in the vines. We need to inform the authorities, Thomas said. No, Arjun said sharply. Thor says no. Some of the police are working with the bad men. That's why the real ranger, Mr. Krishnan, was working alone. He didn't know who to trust. Then what do we do? Priya asked, holding her son protectively. Before anyone could answer, they heard vehicles approaching the resort, multiple vehicles moving fast. Through the window, they could see 3 jeeps pulling into the parking area. Men in uniform got out, but something about them set everyone on edge. Those aren't real forest officers, Margaret whispered. I've been documenting in these jungles for years. Real officers don't carry those kinds of weapons. The lead man was tall and muscular, with a scar running down his left cheek. He walked with the confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted through intimidation. They're here for Thor, Arjun said, fear creeping into his voice for the first time. They tracked his blood trail back to the resort. Dr. Mira quickly covered Thor with a blanket, trying to hide him, but they all knew it was futile. The men were already spreading out, obviously searching for something. What do we do? Priya whispered, pulling Arjun closer. The boy looked at Thor, then at the adults around him. We protect him, no matter what. The scarred man was now at the main lodge, talking to other guests, his voice carrying across the grounds. They couldn't hear the words, but the tone was clear, threatening, demanding. They'll come here next, Raj said. We need a plan. But before anyone could suggest anything, Arjun did something unexpected. He walked to the door and opened it, stepping outside before anyone could stop him. Arjun! No! Priya called, but the boy kept walking, straight toward the scarred man. The man noticed him approaching and smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Well, well, a little boy. Are you lost? You're looking for the dog, Arjun said, his voice steady despite his small size. The German shepherd. The man's eyes sharpened. And what would you know about that? I know you heard him. I know about the cages in the old ranger station. And I know you're not real police. The silence that followed was deafening. The scarred man slowly knelt down to Arjun's level, his fake smile disappearing. You're a very smart little boy. Perhaps too smart for your own good. Let them go, Arjun said. All the animals you've taken. Let them go, and Thor won't tell his ranger what you did. The man laughed, but it was harsh, without humor. The dog will tell the ranger? And how exactly would that happen? Arjun met his gaze steadily. The same way he told me about you, mister. Vikram, the man, Vikram, went very still. How do you know my name? Thor heard you talking when you caught him. Vikram Sharma, former forest officer, now running an animal trafficking ring. You sell rare animals to private collectors. You've been doing it for 3 years. Vikram's hand moved toward his hip, where a gun was holstered, but he stopped when he noticed all the resort guests watching from windows and doorways. Too many witnesses. You have quite an imagination, boy, he said, standing up. But imagination can be dangerous. Perhaps you and your parents should leave this resort, today. We're not going anywhere, Raj said, appearing beside his son. And neither are you until the real authorities arrive. Vikram smiled coldly. The real authorities? And who would that be? My friends in the local police station? or perhaps my contacts in the forest department. You have no idea how deep this goes. Deep enough that you're scared of one injured dog and a 5-year-old boy. Margaret's voice came from behind them. The elderly woman was holding her phone, clearly recording. This will make quite an interesting addition to my wildlife documentary. Vikram's face darkened. You're all making a terrible mistake. The only mistake, a new voice interrupted, was yours, thinking you could operate in my jungle without consequences. Everyone turned to see a man in his 40s, wearing an authentic forest ranger uniform. He was lean and weathered, with intelligent eyes that were currently fixed on Vikram, with barely controlled anger. Krishnan, Vikram said, his confidence wavering slightly. Ranger Krishnan, the man corrected, and you're under arrest for poaching, animal trafficking, and impersonating a government officer. You have no proof, Vikram said, but his men were already backing toward their vehicles. Actually, Krishnan said, I have all the proof I need. You see, Thor isn't just my dog. He's a trained Forest Service dog, and he's been wearing a GPS tracker this whole time. I know exactly where you took him. This was a lie. Arjun could tell from the way Krishnan's heart was racing, but Vikram didn't know that. Even if that were true, Vikram said, you're one man. I have 10. 11, Thomas corrected, stepping forward with a hunting rifle. I may run an eco-resort, but I'm still a licensed hunter, and I don't take kindly to criminals threatening my guests. 12, Dr. Mira added, producing a tranquilizer gun from her medical kit. This is meant for aggressive animals, but I'm willing to make an exception. One by one, other resort guests and staff appeared, some with weapons, others with phones recording everything. Vikram was surrounded, outnumbered, and being filmed from multiple angles. But he still had one card to play. The boy, he said, his voice dangerous. He knows things he shouldn't. That's not natural. Maybe we should find out how he does it. The threat against Arjun changed everything. Thor, who had been lying injured in the storage room, somehow found the strength to stand. The massive German shepherd limped out, each step obviously painful, but his eyes were fixed on Vikram with predatory intensity. The dog placed himself between Vikram and Arjun, his lips pulled back to reveal impressive fangs. A growl rumbled from his chest that made everyone, including Vikram's men, step back. Thor, no, Krishnan said softly. Stand down, boy. But Thor didn't move. He stood protective over Arjun, ready to fight despite his injuries. He won't listen to you right now, Arjun said quietly. He's protecting his pack. That's what he calls us now, his pack. Vikram made the mistake of reaching for his gun. Thor moved faster than anyone thought possible for an injured animal. He didn't attack, but his bark was so fierce, so primal, that Vikram stumbled backward, falling to the ground. That's when they heard the sirens. Real police sirens, not the fake authority Vikram had claimed. Multiple vehicles were approaching fast. You called them? Vikram accused Krishnan. No, the ranger admitted. I didn't trust anyone in the local force. I did, Margaret said, holding up her phone, but not the local police. I called the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau in Delhi. I've been documenting illegal animal trade for months. Your face, mister. Vikram is about to become very famous. The federal agents who arrived were efficient and thorough. They arrested Vikram and his men, taking statements from everyone. But what really sealed Vikram's fate was when they searched the old ranger station based on Arjun's description. They found exactly what the boy had described. Cages full of rare and endangered animals, detailed records of sales, and evidence linking Vikram to an international trafficking network. How did you know? One of the federal agents asked Arjun. How could you possibly have known about the station? Arjun looked at Thor, who was being treated by Dr. Mira, then back at the agent. Sometimes, if you listen really carefully, animals can tell you things. They see everything, remember everything. We just forgot how to understand them. The agent looked skeptical, but Krishnan intervened. However, he knew the information was accurate. That's what matters. As the criminals were driven away and the rescued animals were being transported to rehabilitation centers, Arjun sat with Thor, his small hands gently stroking the dog's fur. The German shepherd's tail wagged weakly, and he licked the boy's face. He says thank you, Arjun told Krishnan, and he wants to know if he can visit us sometimes. Krishnan knelt beside them, his eyes moist. Thor can visit whenever he wants. You saved his life, both of you, he added, looking at Raj and Priya. Your son is very special. We're beginning to understand that, Priya said softly, watching her son whisper to the injured dog. What happens now? Raj asked. With Vikram's network exposed, won't there be revenge? The federal agents will provide protection, Krishnan assured them. And with the evidence we have, Vikram and his associates will be in prison for a very long time. But even as he said it, Arjun felt something cold in his chest. Thor was showing him something. A memory of Vikram talking on the phone to someone he called Sir. Someone more powerful, more dangerous. There's someone else, Arjun said suddenly. Someone above Vikram. Thor heard him talking about the big boss who runs everything from the city. The adults exchanged worried glances. If there was someone above Vikram, someone with more power and resources, then this wasn't over. That night, as the Kumar family tried to rest in their cottage, Arjun couldn't sleep. He stood by the window, looking out at the jungle. In the darkness, he could see eyes reflecting the moonlight. Animals watching, waiting. They're all afraid, he whispered to his parents, who had given up trying to sleep and joined him. The animals know there's something worse coming. What do you mean, Beta? Raj asked, though he dreaded the answer. The big boss. He's angry about losing the animals and his men. Thor heard Vikram talking to him once. He has more places like the old station, more animals trapped, and he won't stop until he finds who ruined his operation. Priya pulled her son close. We'll go home tomorrow, back to Mumbai where it's safe. But Arjun shook his head. It's not safe anywhere, not until all the animals are free. Thor says the boss has people everywhere, in cities, in jungles, even in other countries. This is too big for us, Raj said. We're just one family. But we're not alone, Arjun said, and as if to prove his point, a soft howl echoed through the jungle, then another and another. The animals want to help. They're tired of being afraid. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. A black luxury car pulled up to the resort, and out stepped a man who looked like he belonged in a corporate boardroom, not a jungle resort. He wore an expensive suit, had perfectly styled silver hair, and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. I'm looking for the Kumar family, he announced to Thomas, who had intercepted him at the main lodge. And you are? Thomas asked suspiciously. Ashwin Malhotra, the man said, producing a business card. I represent certain interests that have been affected by recent events. The name meant nothing to Thomas, but Arjun, watching from the cottage window, gasped. That's him, he whispered to his parents. That's the big boss Thor remembers. The morning sun had barely touched the mountain peaks when Ashwin Malhotra stood in the resort's main courtyard, his expensive shoes somehow remaining spotless despite the dusty ground. Thomas had reluctantly called the Kumar family, and they now stood facing this man who radiated power and barely contained menace. Mr. Kumar, Malhotra said, his voice smooth as silk. I heard about your son's remarkable discovery yesterday. Quite the adventure for a 5-year-old. Raj kept Arjun behind him, though he could feel his son trembling, not with fear, but with that same anger he'd shown in the jungle. What do you want? Simply to congratulate you, Malhotra said, his smile never reaching his eyes. And to make you an offer. You see, I run several wildlife conservation programs. Your son's unique sensitivity to animals could be invaluable to our research. Research? Priya asked her, maternal instincts on high alert. Understanding how some individuals can connect with animals on a deeper level. Imagine the applications, better conservation efforts, improved animal welfare, perhaps even preventing human-wildlife conflicts. Malhotra pulled out a check from his jacket. I'm prepared to offer you 5 million rupees for your son to spend just 1 month at our research facility. The amount was staggering, more money than the Kumar family would see in a lifetime. But Arjun stepped out from behind his father, his small face set with determination. You don't help animals, he said clearly. You sell them. Thor remembers your voice. You talked to Vikram about moving the special ones, the white tiger cub, the pangolins, the exotic birds. Malhotra's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and dangerous underneath. Children have such vivid imaginations, he said, but his eyes never left Arjun's face. Perhaps your son watches too much television. He doesn't watch TV, Priya said firmly, and we're not interested in your offer. That's unfortunate, Malhotra said, tucking the check back into his pocket. These jungle areas can be quite dangerous. Accidents happen all the time. Wild animals, steep cliffs, poisonous snakes. A family should be more careful. The threat was clear, even if the words were carefully chosen. Krishnan, who had been listening from nearby, stepped forward. Mr. Malhotra, I'm sure you have urgent business elsewhere. Malhotra looked at the ranger with amusement. Ah, Krishnan, how's your wife? Still teaching at that small school in the valley? And your daughter? She takes the forest path to school every day, doesn't she? Such a brave little girl. The color drained from Krishnan's face. The threat against his family was unmistakable. But before he could respond, something extraordinary happened. Every bird in the surrounding trees suddenly took flight, creating a cacophony of calls and wings. The langur monkeys began shrieking from the canopy, and even the usually calm resort, dogs started barking furiously. The noise was deafening, drawing every guest and staff member out to see what was happening. In the midst of this chaos, Arjun stood perfectly still, his eyes closed, his small hands clenched at his sides. The animals were responding to something, and everyone present could sense it emanated from the boy. "What's happening?" Malhotra demanded, having to raise his voice over the animal sounds. Margaret appeared with her camera, filming everything. "Nature doesn't seem to like you very much, mister." Malhotra, she observed. "In my 40 years of wildlife documentation, I've never seen such a unified response from different species." Dr. Mira had also arrived, Thor limping beside her, despite his injuries. The moment the German shepherd saw Malhotra, his hackles rose, and a deep growl rumbled from his chest. "That's the dog," Malhotra said, his composure cracking. "The one that escaped from—" He caught himself, but it was too late. "From where?" The federal agent who had stayed behind to complete the investigation asked, stepping out from the lodge where he'd been filing reports. "Please, continue." "You were saying the dog escaped from somewhere?" Malhotra straightened his tie, his businessman smile returning. "I misspoke. I meant the dog that was rescued from the forest. Terrible what happened to it." "Yes, terrible," the agent agreed. "Almost as terrible as the trafficking ring we uncovered. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Mr. Malhotra?" "I'm a legitimate businessman. I have documentation for all my conservation programs." "I'm sure you do," the agent said. "Documentation can be bought, just like local police loyalty. But federal oversight is a different matter. The animals were still creating chaos, and Arjun remained in his trance-like state. Raj reached for his son, concerned, but Margaret stopped him. "Look," she whispered, pointing to Arjun's feet. A line of ants was streaming past the boy, completely ignoring him. A butterfly had landed on his shoulder. Even the mosquitoes that plagued everyone at the resort seemed to avoid him. It was as if nature itself had formed a protective barrier around the child. "This is unnatural," Malhotra said, stepping backward. "What kind of child is this?" "The kind that can expose your entire operation," Krishnan said, finding his courage despite the threats to his family. "The kind that saved Thor and led us to your trafficking ring?" Malhotra's phone rang, and his face darkened as he listened to whoever was on the other end. "What do you mean they're all gone?" he said sharply, turning away from the group. "Every single one? That's impossible." When he ended the call, his controlled demeanor had cracked significantly. "It seems there have been some incidents at my other conservation facilities, animals escaping, documentation mysteriously appearing in journalists' inboxes. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "How could we?" Raj asked. "We've been here the whole time." But Malhotra was looking at Arjun, who had finally opened his eyes. The boy looked exhausted but satisfied, as if he'd completed some monumental task. "The animals talk to each other," Arjun said quietly. "Not just here. Everywhere. Birds fly between places carrying messages. Dogs in different cities smell the same scents and remember. They all know about you now. They all know what you do to them." "This is insane," Malhotra said, but there was fear in his voice now. "You're all insane if you believe this child can actually communicate with animals." "Then explain this," Margaret said, still filming. She pointed to the resort's entrance where more animals were gathering. Not just local wildlife, but dogs from the village, cats, even a few cows that had wandered up from the valley. They all stood silently, facing Malhotra. "They remember your smell," Arjun said. From all the places where animals disappeared, from all the cages you've filled, they know who you are. Malhotra pulled out his phone again, trying to call for his driver, but the man wasn't answering. When he looked at his car, he saw why. Monkeys had surrounded the vehicle, and some were sitting on the hood, making it impossible for the driver to move without potentially hurting them, which would be a crime in itself. "This is kidnapping," Malhotra said desperately. "You're holding me against my will." "No one's holding you," Thomas said mildly. "The animals are just expressing their opinion. You're free to walk back down the mountain if you'd like. It's only 15 kilometers through dense jungle." The federal agent stepped forward. "Mr. Malhotra, I think you should come with me. We have some questions about your business operations, especially in light of the evidence that's apparently surfacing at your other facilities." "You have no grounds to arrest me," Malhotra protested. "Arrest? Who said anything about arrest? This is just a friendly conversation. Of course, if you refuse, I might have to look more closely into your permits, your tax records, your international transactions." Trapped between the federal agent's implications and the wall of hostile animals, Malhotra had no choice. As he was led away, he turned back to look at Arjun one more time. "This isn't over," he said. "I have resources you can't imagine, friends in places you can't reach." "So do I," Arjun replied, and as if to emphasize his point, an eagle circled overhead, its cry piercing the morning air. After Malhotra was taken away and the animals gradually dispersed, the Kumar family found themselves at the center of attention. Journalists had somehow gotten word of the incident, and within hours, the remote resort was swarming with media. "We need to leave," Raj said, overwhelmed by the attention. "This is getting out of control." But Krishnan had a different idea. "Actually, I think you should stay. At least for a few more days. Malhotra was right about one thing. He does have powerful friends. You'll be safer here with federal protection than traveling on the open road." "Besides," Dr. Mira added, "Thor isn't ready to travel yet, and he refuses to leave Arjun's side." It was true. The German Shepherd had practically attached himself to the boy, following him everywhere despite his injuries. And Arjun seemed to draw strength from the dog's presence, their bond growing stronger by the hour. That evening, as the family sat in their cottage trying to process everything that had happened, Arjun suddenly stood up, his head tilted in that familiar listening pose. "What is it, Beta?" Priya asked, though she was almost afraid to know. "Something's happening," Arjun said. "The animals in the jungle are upset. There's something new, something that doesn't belong." Before anyone could ask what he meant, they heard it. The sound of helicopters approaching. Not one, but several, their rotors beating the air in synchronized rhythm. Thomas burst into their cottage. "We have a problem. Those aren't government helicopters." Through the window, they could see 3 black helicopters circling the resort like predatory birds. They bore no official markings, no identification of any kind. "Malhotra's backup plan," Krishnan said grimly. "He must have called them before he was taken." One of the helicopters was descending toward the resort's small clearing, its downdraft sending furniture flying and guests running for cover. Armed men in black tactical gear rappelled down even before it touched the ground. "They're not here to hurt anyone," Arjun said suddenly. "They're here for evidence, to destroy anything that links back to the big operation." "How can you know that?" Raj asked. "The birds," Arjun said simply. "They can see into the helicopters. The men have special bags for collecting papers and computers, and cages. Empty cages for something. For Thor," Krishnan realized. "He's the living evidence. He was at their facility. He can be traced back to them through DNA, microchips, whatever they use to track their animals." "They want me too," Arjun added quietly. "The men are carrying tranquilizer guns with special darts, the kind they use for human children in kidnapping cases." The tactical team was efficiently searching the resort, not violently, but with determined purpose. They had some kind of legal-looking documents they were showing to terrified guests, probably fake warrants or government orders. "We need to get you out of here," Krishnan said urgently. "There's an old ranger trail behind the cottage. It leads deeper into the jungle, to an observation post that few people know about." "I'm not leaving Thor," Arjun said firmly. "We'll bring him, Doctor," Mira said, already gathering medical supplies. "He can walk short distances now." As they prepared to flee, the tactical team was getting closer, systematically searching each cottage. They moved with military precision, clearly professionals hired for exactly this kind of operation. "Wait," Arjun said suddenly. "We don't need to run. The jungle will help us." "Arjun, these men have guns," Raj said desperately. "The animals can't fight armed soldiers." "They don't need to fight," Arjun said, closing his eyes again. "They just need to hide us." What happened next defied explanation. The mist that usually clung to the mountains in the early morning suddenly rolled in thick and fast, despite it being evening. Within minutes, visibility dropped to mere meters. The helicopter pilots had to pull up to avoid crashing into the mountainside. In the chaos of the sudden weather change, the Kumar family, along with Krishnan, Dr. Mira, Thor, and Margaret, who refused to be left behind, slipped out the back of the cottage and into the jungle. The path Krishnan led them on was barely visible even in good conditions. Now, shrouded in mist, it should have been impossible to navigate. But Arjun walked with confidence, Thor limping beside him, somehow finding safe footing in the darkness. "The animals are guiding us," Arjun explained when his father asked how he could see. "They know every root, every stone. They're sharing their knowledge with me." Behind them, they could hear the tactical team's frustration. Their night vision equipment was malfunctioning in the thick mist, and their communication devices were filled with static. The jungle itself seemed to be interfering with their technology. After an hour of careful hiking, they reached the observation posts Krishnan had mentioned. It was a small concrete structure built decades ago for forest monitoring, now mostly forgotten and overgrown with vines. "We can rest here," Krishnan said, helping Thor inside. "It's defensible and has supplies." As they settled in, Margaret pulled out her satellite phone, one of the few devices that still worked. "I'm calling my contacts at international wildlife organizations," she said. "This has gone beyond local crime. Malhotra's network is international, and so should be our response." While she made her calls, Arjun sat with Thor, both of them staring out into the misty jungle. The boy's expression was distant, troubled. "What do you see?" Dr. Mira asked gently. "The trafficking network is huge," Arjun said, his voice small and overwhelmed. "Thor is showing me memories from the facility. There were buyers from many countries. They had catalogs of animals they could provide, species that are almost extinct, baby animals stolen from their mothers, even parts of animals for medicine that doesn't really work." "Parts?" Priya asked, horrified. "Horns, bones, skins," Arjun whispered. "The animals that weren't pretty enough to sell alive, they... He couldn't finish, breaking down in tears. Thor nuzzled him gently, and Raj wrapped his son in a tight embrace. "You don't have to see anymore," Raj said. "You've done enough." "No," Arjun said, wiping his eyes. "The animals want people to know. They want their stories told, so it stops happening." Margaret lowered her phone. "My contacts are mobilizing. This is going to be on international news within hours, but they need proof, documented evidence that can't be dismissed as coincidence or fabrication." "The proof is in the mountain," Arjun said suddenly. Thor remembers now. "There's another facility, bigger than the ranger station. It's built into an old mine shaft. That's where they keep the most valuable animals, the ones worth millions on the black market." "Where?" Krishnan asked, already pulling out his maps. Arjun closed his eyes, consulting with Thor. "North of here, about 7 kilometers. There's a waterfall that hides the entrance. The water is why they chose it. It masks sounds and smells." "That's the old Copper Falls mine," Krishnan said. "It was abandoned in the 1960s, perfect cover for an illegal operation. We need to get this information to the federal agents," Raj said. "No time," Arjun said urgently. "The helicopters aren't just here to destroy evidence. They're here to evacuate. They're moving all the animals tonight, taking them across the border where Indian law can't reach." They all looked at each other, understanding the impossible situation. They were a small group of civilians, a child, and an injured dog, against a well-funded criminal organization with military-grade resources. "We can't stop them," Priya said. "This is too big for us." "Not alone," Arjun said, "but we're not alone." He stood up and walked to the door of the observation post, Thor following, despite his injuries. The boy raised his small hands to his mouth and made a sound, Not quite human, not quite animal, but something primal that seemed to resonate through the mist-shrouded jungle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then from the darkness came an answer, a howl, long and mournful. Then another from a different direction. Soon, the jungle was alive with calls, barks, howls, chittering, roars that sounded too deep and powerful to be real. "What did you do?" whispered Priya. "I asked for help," Arjun said simply. "And they're coming." Through the mist, shapes began to appear. Not just the local wildlife they'd seen before, but animals that shouldn't be here. A leopard, sleek and dangerous, padding silently out of the shadows. A sloth bear, normally shy and reclusive, standing on its hind legs to sniff the air. Even a small group of elephants, their massive forms materializing like ghosts from the fog. "This is impossible, Doctor," Mira breathed. "These species don't congregate like this. Predators and prey together. It goes against every instinct." "They know what's at stake," Arjun said. "Their families, their babies, their friends, all stolen by the same people. They're willing to work together to stop it." Margaret was filming everything, her hands shaking with excitement and fear. "No one will believe this. I'm seeing it and I don't believe it." "They don't need to believe," Krishnan said, understanding dawning on his face. "They just need to see what happens next." "Arjun, what's the plan?" The boy looked at the assembled animals, then at the adults around him. "We're going to save them all. Every single animal in that mountain. But I need you to trust me, even when it seems impossible." "We trust you," Raj said, though his paternal instinct screamed against putting his son in danger. Arjun nodded and walked among the animals, touching each one briefly. With each touch, the animal would stiffen slightly, then relax, as if receiving instructions. "The elephants will create a distraction at the main entrance," Arjun explained. "The monkeys and birds will disable their vehicles and communications. The leopard and bear will guard the exit so no one can escape with animals." "And us?" Krishnan asked. "We go in through the waterfall while they're distracted. We open every cage, destroy their records, and make sure the whole world sees what they've been doing." It was an insane plan, relying on perfect coordination between wild animals and humans. But as Raj looked at his son, standing confidently among creatures that should terrify him, he realized that the normal rules no longer applied. "When do we move?" he asked. Arjun looked at the moon rising through the mist. "Now. They're loading the animals now. We have maybe an hour before the helicopters leave." The journey to Copper Falls was surreal. They moved through the jungle surrounded by animals, predators, and prey, maintaining an impossible truce. Thor, despite his injuries, insisted on leading the way, his nose picking up scents that guided them through the safest paths. As they approached the falls, they could hear the sound of machinery over the water's roar, generators, vehicles, the clank of cages being moved. The criminal operation was in full swing, confident that the mist and isolation would hide their activities. "There," Krishnan pointed to lights visible behind the waterfall's curtain. "The mine entrance." Several armed guards were visible, patrolling the area with military efficiency. These weren't the local thugs from Vikram's operation. These were international mercenaries, hired to protect valuable cargo. "Too many guards," Raj said. "They'll see us coming." "No," Arjun said. "They'll be too busy." As if on cue, a tremendous trumpeting echoed through the valley. The elephants had begun their distraction, and from the shouts of alarm, it was working. Several guards ran toward the main entrance, leaving their posts. "Now the monkeys," Arjun whispered. Suddenly, the lights around the mine began going out one by one. The Langers were systematically destroying the electrical connections, plunging sections into darkness. The generators sputtered as clever fingers found their fuel lines. In the chaos, the small group made their move. They slipped behind the waterfall, the cold water soaking them instantly. The mine entrance was larger than expected, opening into a vast cavern system that had been converted into a sophisticated holding facility. The sight that greeted them was heartbreaking. Hundreds of cages lined the cavern walls, stacked 3 high in some places. Inside were animals from across Asia. Pangolins rolled into terrified balls, rare birds huddled in corners, baby monkeys crying for mothers they'd never see again. "My God," Margaret whispered, her camera capturing everything. This is genocide." We need to move fast, Krishnan said. Start opening cages. I'll look for their records, their buyer lists. They spread out, working frantically. The cages had sophisticated locks, but Arjun seemed to know exactly how to open each one, as if the captured animals were guiding him. As each cage opened, its occupant would pause, look at the boy, then flee toward freedom. "Arjun, over here!" Dr. Meera called from a darker section of the cavern. They found her standing before a series of larger enclosures. Inside were the crown jewels of the trafficking operation. A white tiger cub, barely weeks old, a clouded leopard, one of the rarest cats in the world, and in the largest cage, a young elephant, no more than a year old, swaying back and forth in distress. "These are the ones they were prioritizing for evacuation, Doctor," Meera said. "They're worth millions on the black market." Arjun approached the elephant's cage, placing his small hands on the bars. The young elephant stopped swaying and extended its trunk, touching the boy's face gently. "Her name is Sundari," Arjun said softly. "She remembers her mother. The poachers killed her mother to take her." "We'll get her out," Raj promised, working on the heavy lock. But before they could free her, they heard footsteps approaching. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. They'd been discovered. "Hide!" Krishnan hissed, but there was nowhere to go in the open cavern. The mercenaries entered, weapons raised, their leader scanning the area with night vision goggles. They had dealt with the elephant distraction and realized it was a diversion. "I know you're in here," the leader called out in accented English. "Come out now, and no one gets hurt. We only want the boy." "They want me?" Arjun whispered, confused. "Mr. Malhotra is very interested in your abilities," the mercenary continued. "He's offering 50 million rupees for your cooperation. Your family can be wealthy beyond imagination." "Never," Raj called out, stepping protectively in front of his son. The mercenaries zeroed in on their position, weapons trained on the family. But they'd forgotten about Thor. The injured German shepherd had circled around in the darkness and now launched himself at the nearest gunman, despite his injuries. The attack triggered chaos. The partially freed animals panicked, creating a cacophony of sounds that echoed deafeningly in the cavern. In the confusion, more animals entered from outside, the leopard and bear that Arjun had positioned as guards. The mercenaries, trained for human opponents, were completely unprepared for a coordinated animal assault. The leopard moved like liquid shadow, disarming men before they could react. The bear's massive presence sent others fleeing toward the exit, only to find it blocked by angry elephants. But the leader maintained his composure, his weapon still trained on Arjun. "Call them off, boy, or I'll shoot your parents." Arjun stepped forward, his small face calm despite the threat. "You won't shoot anyone." "What makes you so sure?" "Because," Arjun said, raising his hand, "you're about to have bigger problems." The sound started low, almost below human hearing. A humming, buzzing noise that grew louder and louder. The mercenary leader looked around confused, then his eyes widened in terror as he realized what was approaching. Bees, thousands upon thousands of bees, flowing into the cavern like a living river. Not attacking, not yet, but surrounding the mercenaries in a cloud of wings and warning. "Rock bees," Krishnan identified, his voice awed. "They're protecting their territory." "This territory includes us now," Arjun said simply. The mercenary leader, faced with the very real threat of thousands of bee stings, slowly lowered his weapon. His men followed suit, their bravado crumbling in the face of nature's coordinated response. "You're making a mistake," the leader said. "Mr. Malhotra has resources you can't imagine. He'll never stop hunting you." "Then we'll make sure he can't," Margaret said, still filming. "This footage is being streamed live to servers around the world. Every major news organization will have it within minutes. Your operation is finished." The realization of their exposure broke the mercenaries' remaining resolve. They fled, abandoning their weapons and equipment, pursued by the bees until they were well clear of the mine. With the immediate threat gone, the group returned to freeing the remaining animals. The baby elephant, Sundari, was the last to be released. She immediately sought out Arjun, wrapping her small trunk around his arm in what looked remarkably like a hug. "She wants to stay with me," Arjun said, tears in his eyes. "But she needs to be with other elephants. She needs a family. The wildlife sanctuary in Munnar will take her, Doctor, Mira said. They have other orphaned elephants. She'll have a family there. As dawn broke over the mountains, the full extent of their night's work became visible. Empty cages littered the cavern, and freed animals were disappearing into the jungle to find their way home. The criminal network's hub had been completely destroyed, but their victory was tempered by exhaustion and the knowledge that Malhotra was still out there, still dangerous. As they emerged from behind the waterfall, they found federal agents waiting, alerted by Margaret's international contacts. "You've done something incredible here," the lead agent said, "but you've also made powerful enemies. We need to get you into protective custody." "No," Arjun said firmly. "We're not hiding. The animals showed me something tonight. When we stand together, when we refuse to be afraid, the bad people lose their power." "He's right," Krishnan added. "Malhotra's strength came from secrecy, from people not knowing what he was doing. Now the whole world knows." Margaret's footage had indeed gone viral. Within hours, it was the top story on every major news network. The image of a 5-year-old boy standing among wild animals, coordinating their rescue mission, captured the world's imagination. But more importantly, it sparked action. International law enforcement agencies launched coordinated raids on Malhotra's other operations. Wildlife organizations mobilized resources to care for the freed animals. And governments that had turned a blind eye to trafficking suddenly found themselves under intense public pressure to act. The Kumar family found themselves at the center of this storm, their quiet life in Mumbai a distant memory. They stayed at the resort for another week, partly for protection, but mostly because Arjun refused to leave until he was sure all the animals were safe. During this time, something remarkable happened. Other children from nearby villages began visiting, drawn by stories of the boy who could talk to animals, and incredibly, some of them began showing similar abilities. "It's not unique to me," Arjun explained to his amazed parents. "All children can do this when they're young. They just need someone to show them it's real, that it's not just imagination." He would sit with these children, teaching them to quiet their minds, to listen with more than their ears. And one by one, they began to understand what the animals were saying. Dr. Mira documented everything, her scientific mind struggling to explain what she was witnessing. "It's like Arjun has awakened something dormant in these children," she said, "some ancient ability we've lost through civilization." Thor, recovering remarkably well from his injuries, became the ambassador between the human and animal worlds. He would patiently work with the children, helping them understand the subtle communications that animals used. But the peaceful interlude couldn't last. One evening, as the Kumar family sat on their cottage balcony, Arjun suddenly stiffened, his eyes going wide with alarm. "He's coming," he whispered. "Malhotra, he's coming here himself." "How do you know?" Raj asked, though he'd learned not to doubt his son's warnings. The birds saw his convoy. Many cars, many men with guns. "They'll be here by morning." Krishnan immediately called the federal agents, but the response was troubling. Malhotra had been released on bail, his lawyers successfully arguing that there was no direct evidence linking him to the trafficking operation. "He's untouchable legally," the agent explained over the phone. "Without documents or testimony directly implicating him, we can't arrest him again." "Then we need to find that evidence," Raj said determinedly. "Thor knows where it is," Arjun said suddenly. "In Malhotra's house, there's a secret room. Thor saw it when they first captured him, before they moved him to the facility. That's where Malhotra keeps the real records, the ones that show everything." "That's in Delhi," Krishnan said, "over 1,000 kilometers away." "Then we need to go to Delhi," Arjun said simply. The adults exchanged glances. Taking a 5-year-old boy to burglarize a criminal's house seemed like insanity. But then again, everything about the past week had been insane. "He's right," Margaret said. "We need that evidence, and Malhotra won't expect us to go on the offensive. He thinks we're helpless victims." "It's too dangerous," Priya protested. "I won't risk Arjun's life for evidence." "Mom," Arjun said, using the English word he rarely used. "If we don't stop him, he'll just start again somewhere else. More animals will. He suffer. More families like Thor's will be destroyed." Thor barked once, as if in agreement, and padded over to stand beside the boy. Despite his healing injuries, the German Shepherd's stance was proud, ready for whatever came next. "We can't take an injured dog and a child to Delhi to confront a crime lord," Raj said, but his protest sounded weak even to himself. Not just us, Arjun said. The animals in Delhi know about Malhotra too. Street dogs, temple monkeys, even the birds in his garden. They've been waiting for someone to help them fight back. The plan that emerged over the next hours was audacious beyond belief. They would travel to Delhi, not to confront Malhotra directly, but to gather the evidence while he was here in Kerala looking for them. Margaret would use her media connections to ensure maximum publicity. Krishnan would coordinate with honest law enforcement officials he knew in the capital. But the key to everything would be Arjun's ability to coordinate with the urban animals of Delhi, creatures that had learned to survive in one of the world's most crowded cities. City animals are different from jungle animals, Arjun explained, his knowledge seemingly coming from Thor's memories. They're smarter about humans, more careful, but they're also angrier about what humans have done to them. As they prepared to leave that night, using the cover of darkness to avoid Malhotra's approaching convoy, Arjun stood one last time at the jungle's edge. The assembled animals, leopard, bear, elephants, monkeys, and countless others, had gathered to say goodbye. "Thank you," Arjun said simply. And though the words were in Hindi, every creature seemed to understand. The elephant matriarch raised her trunk in salute. The leopard blinked slowly, a cat's sign of trust. Even the bees performed a complex aerial dance that looked almost like a blessing. "They're saying they'll spread the word," Arjun translated. "Animals everywhere will know what we're trying to do. We won't be alone in Delhi." As their car pulled away from the resort, taking back roads to avoid detection, Raj looked at his son in the rearview mirror. The boy who'd left Mumbai as a quiet, sensitive child was transforming into something unprecedented, a bridge between two worlds that had been separated for far too long. "Are you scared?" Priya asked Arjun as they drove through the darkness. "Yes," Arjun admitted. "But Thor says courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are scared." The German shepherd, curled up beside the boy, thumped his tail in agreement. Whatever awaited them in Delhi, they would face it together. The journey to Delhi took 2 days, traveling through back roads and small towns to avoid detection. They switched vehicles twice, aided by wildlife activists Margaret had contacted, who were eager to help bring down Malhotra's empire. Thor rode with his head on Arjun's lap, occasionally lifting his nose to smell the changing landscapes as jungle gave way to farmland, then to the urban sprawl of India's capital. As they entered Delhi's chaotic traffic, Arjun pressed his face to the window, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "There are so many of them," he whispered. "So many what, Beta?" Priya asked. "Animals. Hurt animals, scared animals, angry animals. They're everywhere, but nobody sees them." It was true. Once you looked past the honking cars and bustling crowds, Delhi's animal population was enormous. Street dogs lounging in whatever shade they could find, monkeys swinging from power lines, birds nesting in every available space, and countless cats slinking through alleyways. "They survive however they can," Arjun continued, his voice sad. "Eating garbage, drinking dirty water, dodging cars and cruel people. But they remember when the city was smaller, when there were more trees, when humans and animals lived together better." They checked into a small hotel in Carol Bagh under false names, paid for by Margaret's international contacts. The plan was simple in concept, but nearly impossible in execution. While Malhotra was in Kerala hunting for them, they would infiltrate his Delhi mansion and find the evidence needed to destroy his network permanently. "His house is in Vasant Vihar," Krishnan explained, spreading out surveillance photos Margaret's journalist friends had provided. "High walls, security cameras, armed guards. It's a fortress, but it has weaknesses," Arjun said, studying the photos with Thor. The dog was looking at the images intently, his tail twitching with recognition. "Thor says there's a drainage tunnel that connects to the old sewer system. The street dogs use it to move around the neighborhood unseen." "You're not going through a sewer," Priya said firmly. "Not me," Arjun agreed, "but Thor can, and he can guide others." That evening, as the sun set over Delhi's smoggy skyline, Arjun sat on the hotel's roof with Thor. The boy closed his eyes and did something he'd never attempted before, reaching out to an entire city's worth of animals at once. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of minds touched his, each carrying their own stories of survival, loss, and anger toward humans who had made their lives so difficult. Arjun gasped, nearly breaking the connection, but Thor pressed against him, lending strength. "I need your help," Arjun whispered into the evening air, knowing somehow that his message would be heard. "The man who hurts animals in the jungle also hurts them here. He's the one who pays people to catch street dogs for fighting. He's the one who traps monkeys to sell. Help us stop him, and we can make things better for everyone." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, from the streets below, came a sound that made everyone in the hotel look up in wonder. Dogs were howling, not just a few, but hundreds, their voices rising in unison across the neighborhood. The howling spread like a wave across the city, picked up, and carried by thousands of canine throats. "They're spreading the message," Arjun said, tears streaming down his face from the emotional intensity of the connection. "Every animal in Delhi will know by morning." Margaret, who had been filming everything, lowered her camera in awe. "This is beyond anything I've ever documented. It's like you've started an animal revolution." "Not a revolution," Arjun corrected, "a revelation. They're learning they're not alone, that they can work together." The next morning brought disturbing news. Malhotra had discovered their ruse in Kerala and was returning to Delhi on his private jet. They had perhaps 6 hours before he arrived. "We move now," Krishnan decided. "Arjun, are the animals ready?" The boy nodded, though he looked exhausted from maintaining connections with so many creatures. "They're already in position. The monkeys are in the trees around his house. The birds are watching from the roofs. And the street dogs, they're waiting in the tunnels." The plan required precise timing. Raj and Krishnan would create a distraction at the front gate, posing as electrical inspectors. Margaret would be positioned outside, ready to film and call for help if needed. Dr. Meera would wait in a van with medical supplies in case anyone, human or animal, was injured. And Arjun, against every parental instinct Priya possessed, would guide Thor and a select group of street dogs through the drainage tunnels into Malhotra's compound. "I'll be with him," Priya insisted, though the thought of crawling through sewers terrified her. "I'm not letting him go alone." "The tunnel is too small for adults," Krishnan said gently. "Only Arjun and the dogs can fit." "Then he's not going," Priya said firmly. "Mom," Arjun said, taking her hands in his small ones. "Remember what you told me? Sometimes we have to help others even when it's dangerous. This is one of those times." The argument might have continued, but Thor suddenly barked urgently. Arjun's eyes widened as he understood the message. "Malhotra's plane landed early. He's already on his way to the house. We have to go now." There was no more time for debate. They piled into 2 vehicles and raced toward Vasant Vihar, the morning traffic both a hindrance and a cover for their approach. As they neared Malhotra Street, Arjun could feel the presence of hundreds of animals, all waiting for his signal. The mansion was even more imposing in person than in the photos. 3 stories of white marble and tinted glass, surrounded by walls topped with barbed wire, and security cameras at every corner. Guards patrolled the perimeter with military precision. "There," Arjun pointed to a storm drain grate half hidden by overgrown bushes about 50 meters from the main gate. "That's where we enter." Raj and Krishnan approached the front gate, clipboards in hand, looking every bit the part of municipal inspectors. As they engaged the guards in bureaucratic arguments about electrical safety inspections, Arjun and Thor slipped toward the drain. The grate was already loose, pulled aside by the street dogs who had prepared the way. 3 lean, battle-scarred dogs waited in the darkness below, their eyes reflecting the morning light. "These are the pack leaders," Arjun explained to his terrified mother. "They know every tunnel in Delhi. They'll protect us." "Arjun, please," Priya begged one last time. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Arjun said, then hugged his mother tightly. "I'll be okay. Thor won't let anything happen to me." Before she could stop him, he lowered himself into the drain, Thor following, despite his still healing injuries. The 3 street dogs surrounded them protectively, and they disappeared into the darkness. The tunnel was worse than Arjun had imagined. The smell was overwhelming, and he had to crawl through substances he didn't want to identify. But the dogs guided him expertly, choosing paths that were relatively dry and stable. Thor stayed close, occasionally nudging him with his nose in encouragement. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, they reached a junction where the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Here, more dogs waited, dozens of them, all sizes and breeds, united in their purpose. "He's above us," one of the pack leaders seemed to communicate, and Arjun understood. They were directly under Malhotra's mansion. Following Thor's memories and the street dog's knowledge of the tunnel system, they found an old maintenance shaft that led up into the mansion's basement. The metal grate at the top was rusted but intact. It took the combined effort of several dogs pushing to break it free. Arjun emerged into a utility room, his clothes filthy, but his determination intact. Thor and the 3 pack leaders followed, while the other dogs remained in the tunnels as backup. The basement was dark and musty, filled with old furniture and boxes, but Thor's nose led them unerringly to a heavy wooden door marked with warning signs in multiple languages. "This is it," Arjun whispered. "The secret room." The door was locked with an electronic keypad, impossible for a child to crack. But Arjun had learned something important about animals in cities. They observed everything. He closed his eyes and reached out to a different set of allies. Within moments, a rhesus monkey dropped through an open window, carrying something in its clever fingers, a security keycard. "The monkeys watch Malhotra every day," Arjun explained to the amazed dogs. "They know where he hides things." The keycard worked, and the door swung open to reveal Malhotra's true nature. The room was filled with filing cabinets, computers, and walls covered with maps marking trafficking routes across Asia. But what made Arjun gasp were the photographs. Hundreds of images of captured animals, each labeled with prices and buyer information. "We need to document everything," Arjun said, pulling out the small camera his father had given him. He began photographing everything: documents, computer screens, maps, the horrifying catalog of animals for sale. Thor suddenly growled, his hackles rising. Footsteps were approaching from above. Many footsteps. "Malhotra's here," Arjun whispered, fear finally breaking through his determination. The footsteps were coming down the basement stairs. There was no time to escape back through the tunnels. They were trapped. But then Arjun remembered something important. They weren't alone. He reached out with his mind, calling to all the animals who had gathered around the mansion. The response was immediate and chaotic. Every monkey in the neighborhood descended on the mansion at once, breaking windows, setting off alarms, creating absolute mayhem. Birds dove at the security cameras, blocking their view. And from the tunnels below, the howling of dozens of dogs echoed through the house's foundations. In the confusion, Arjun heard Malhotra's voice shouting orders. "Find them! They're here somewhere! And get rid of these damned animals!" The door to the secret room burst open, and Malhotra himself stood there, his usually perfect appearance disheveled, his eyes wild with rage. Behind him were 2 guards, weapons drawn. "So," he said, his voice deadly calm despite the chaos above, "the boy who talks to animals. You've caused me a great deal of trouble." Thor moved to attack, but the guard's weapon stopped him. The German shepherd stood frozen between protecting Arjun and the certain death that would come from charging armed men. "You're just a child," Malhotra continued, approaching slowly. "You don't understand the complexities of business, of supply and demand. People want exotic animals. I simply provide them." "You steal them from their families," Arjun said, his voice stronger than he felt. "You hurt them, kill them, sell them like things. They're not things. They have feelings, families, dreams." Malhotra laughed, but it was an ugly sound. "Dreams? They're animals, boy. They exist to serve human purposes." "No," Arjun said firmly. "They exist for themselves, and they're tired of being victims." As if his words were a signal, the lights went out. The entire mansion plunged into darkness. In the black, Arjun heard the guards shouting in panic, the sound of bodies falling, growls and snarls that seemed to come from everywhere at once. When emergency lighting flickered on moments later, both guards were on the ground, unconscious but breathing, surrounded by street dogs who had emerged from the tunnel. Malhotra stood alone, his confidence finally cracking. "This is impossible," he muttered. "They're just animals. They can't coordinate like this." "They can when someone helps them remember they're not alone," Arjun said. "And now the whole world will know what you've done." He held up the camera, showing that he'd been recording everything, including Malhotra's confession about providing exotic animals. Malhotra lunged for the camera, but Thor was faster. The German shepherd, despite his injuries, knocked the man to the ground, standing over him with teeth bared. "Call him off," Malhotra demanded, real fear in his voice now. "I don't control him," Arjun said. "He makes his own choices. And right now, he's choosing to make sure you never hurt another animal again." The sound of sirens was growing closer. Multiple sirens, police, media vans, animal welfare vehicles. Margaret's international contacts had done their job. "You can't prove anything," Malhotra said desperately. "Those documents could be fake. The photos could be staged." "Maybe," Arjun agreed. "But can you fake this?" He gestured to the walls where the street dogs were carefully pulling out documents with their teeth, carrying them toward the tunnel to safety. The monkeys were photographing everything with phones they'd stolen from the guards. Even the birds were participating, carrying flash drives and memory cards out through the windows. "Every animal in Delhi knows what you've done," Arjun said, "and they're all witnesses now." The police arrived to find Malhotra's mansion in chaos. Animals were everywhere, but none were aggressive toward the officers. They seemed to be waiting, watching, as if ensuring justice would be done. The evidence was overwhelming. Not just what Arjun had photographed, but documents the animals had retrieved, computer files the monkeys had somehow accessed, and video footage from hidden cameras that birds had uncovered in their systematic destruction of the security system. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source. The 3 street dog pack leaders had led police to a hidden sub-basement that even Arjun hadn't known about. Inside were cages, empty now, but with clear signs of recent use. DNA evidence would later confirm that dozens of endangered species had been held there. Malhotra was arrested, and this time, no amount of lawyers or connections could save him. The evidence was too overwhelming, the public outcry too intense. Margaret's footage of Arjun coordinating the animal rescue went beyond viral. It became a global phenomenon that changed how people thought about animal intelligence and rights. But for Arjun, standing in the mansion's garden as animals slowly dispersed back to their territories, the victory felt hollow. Thor sensed his sadness and nuzzled his hand. "We saved many," Arjun said softly, "but so many are already gone, sold, killed, lost forever." "You did more than save animals," Krishnan said, joining them in the garden. "You've shown the world that they're not just resources to be exploited. They're individuals with their own intelligence, their own value." Over the following weeks, the impact of what became known as the Delhi Animal Uprising rippled across the world. Countries strengthened their wildlife protection laws. International trafficking networks were exposed and dismantled. And most surprisingly, reports came in from everywhere of children displaying similar abilities to communicate with animals. "It was always there," Arjun explained to a gathering of scientists and journalists who had come to study the phenomenon. "The ability to connect with animals. We just forgot how to listen. But when one person remembers, others can learn." He demonstrated with a group of children from Delhi slums who had come to see the famous Animal Boy. Within hours, several were showing signs of enhanced communication with the street dogs they had known all their lives. Dr. Meera, who had been documenting everything, published papers that revolutionized understanding of interspecies communication. "It's not telepathy in the traditional sense," she explained. "It's more like a universal language of emotion and intent that all mammals share. Human children are naturally attuned to it, but most lose the ability as they are taught to prioritize verbal communication." Thor recovered fully from his injuries and was officially adopted by the Kumar family. But his role went far beyond being a pet. He became a teacher, working with Arjun to help other children develop their latent abilities. The Kumar family's small Mumbai apartment became a pilgrimage site of sorts. Parents brought children who showed unusual sensitivity to animals. Veterinarians brought traumatized animals who wouldn't respond to traditional treatment. And always, Arjun and Thor worked together, building bridges between species. But the work took its toll. Maintaining connections with so many animals, feeling their pain and fear, aged Arjun in ways that worried his parents. He would wake from nightmares where he experienced the memories of trafficked animals, their terror and loneliness flooding through him. "It's too much for one child," Priya told Raj one evening, as they watched Arjun work with yet another group of rescued animals. "He carries all their pain. But also their joy," Raj pointed out. It was true. When Arjun successfully rehabilitated an animal or taught another child to communicate, his happiness was radiant. He literally glowed with the shared joy of interspecies connection. 6 months after Malhotra's arrest, they received unexpected news. The businessman had been killed in prison, allegedly by other inmates who were disgusted by his crimes against animals. But Arjun, touching Thor's head, knew differently. It wasn't inmates, he told his parents quietly. The prison guard's dog did it. The dog whose puppies were stolen for fighting rings. He waited, planned, and when the guard wasn't looking. Animals can't plan murder, Priya said, though she sounded uncertain. Not murder, Arjun corrected. Justice. Their kind of justice. The revelation that animals might be capable of coordinated vengeance sent shockwaves through society. Security protocols at zoos, farms, and any facility holding animals were hastily revised. The old assumption that animals were simply reactive creatures was crumbling. But with awareness came positive changes too. Cities began designing spaces that accommodated both human and animal residents. Veterinary care for street animals became subsidized, and most importantly, a new generation of children grew up knowing they could communicate with the animals around them. Arjun became the unofficial ambassador for this new world. He traveled to conferences, worked with governments, and helped establish communication protocols between human and animal communities. But he always returned to Mumbai, to the small apartment where Thor waited, tail wagging, ready to share whatever burden the boy carried. One day, 3 years after the jungle rescue that started everything, Arjun received a visitor. Sundari, the baby elephant he'd freed from the trafficking ring, had grown into a magnificent young adult. She'd been brought to Mumbai for a wildlife exhibition, but her handlers said she'd become agitated, trumpeting constantly until they agreed to bring her to see Arjun. The reunion was emotional. Sundari wrapped her trunk around Arjun, now 8 years old, but still small for his age. She rumbled deep in her chest, a sound of pure contentment. She says she's happy, Arjun translated for the amazed onlookers. She has a family now, other elephants who love her. But she wanted me to know she remembers. They all remember. All? Someone asked. Arjun nodded, his eyes distant as he connected with something vast and incomprehensible. Every animal we saved, every animal that heard about what we did. They remember. And they're teaching their young to remember too, teaching them that some humans can be trusted, that communication is possible. Margaret, still documenting everything, asked the question everyone was thinking. What does this mean for the future, for the relationship between humans and animals? Arjun thought for a moment, his hand resting on Thor's head while Sundari's trunk touched his shoulder. It means we're not alone on this planet. We never were. We just forgot how to see our neighbors, how to hear their voices. But now, we're remembering. He looked directly at Margaret's camera, his young face serious but hopeful. And once you remember, you can't forget again. The animals won't let us. The exhibition where Sundari was featured became a turning point. For the first time, visitors could see information cards written from the animal's perspective, translated by children like Arjun. Instead of just listing species and habitat, the cards said things like, "My name is Sundari. I like bananas, but love jackfruit. I miss my mother, but my new family helps me feel safe. I remember the boy who saved me. Please don't buy products made from elephant tusks." Those were someone's mother, father, sister, brother. The personalization of animals, understanding them as individuals with preferences and memories and relationships, changed everything. Poaching dropped dramatically. It's hard to kill something you can understand. Pet abandonment became rare. How could you abandon a family member who could tell others what you did? But there were challenges too. Farms struggled with the ethical implications of raising animals for food when those animals could potentially communicate their fear. Courts grappled with questions of animal testimony. Could Thor identify criminals in a lineup? He could and did, leading to several convictions. Some people resented the change, claiming children like Arjun were frauds or that giving animals too much consideration would destroy human civilization. They formed groups dedicated to maintaining human supremacy, and sometimes targeted children who showed communication abilities. One such group attempted to kidnap Arjun from his school, but they hadn't counted on Mumbai's street dogs, who had appointed themselves his protectors. The would-be kidnappers were found hours later, surrounded by dozens of growling dogs, too terrified to move until police arrived. The animals protect those who can hear them, Arjun explained later. It's not worship or servitude. It's friendship, equal partnership. This partnership was tested when a massive cyclone struck the eastern coast. Traditional evacuation methods were failing, but children with communication abilities were able to coordinate with local animals who knew the safest routes and hiding places. Birds provided aerial surveillance, dogs led people through flooding streets, and even rats guided rescuers to trapped survivors in collapsed buildings. The success of animal-assisted disaster response led to formal programs training children and animals together for emergency situations. Arjun and Thor became the lead instructors for the Mumbai program, teaching both species how to work as equals. But perhaps the most profound change came in everyday life. Streets became safer as criminal activity dropped. It's hard to commit crimes when every stray dog is a potential witness. Mental health improved as people formed deeper bonds with animal companions who could truly communicate their affection and support. Children who had been diagnosed with autism or other communication disorders often showed remarkable abilities to connect with animals, finding in them the understanding they struggled to achieve with humans. Arjun worked especially closely with these children, recognizing in them a familiar feeling of being between worlds. "We're translators," he told a group of such children during a workshop. "We stand between the human world and the animal world, helping them understand each other. It's a gift, not a disorder." One boy, who hadn't spoken in years, suddenly said his first words. "The cat says thank you." His therapy cat had been trying to communicate gratitude for months, and finally, someone could hear her. As Arjun grew older, his abilities evolved. By age 10, he could sense the emotional state of entire ecosystems, feeling when forests were stressed by pollution or when ocean creatures were struggling with warming waters. This expansion of awareness was both a blessing and a curse. "It's like feeling the whole planet breathing," he told his parents one evening, tears streaming down his face. "And it's having trouble. The animals are scared, not just of individual humans anymore, but of what all humans together are doing to the world." This led to a new phase of Arjun's work, environmental communication. He began translating not just individual animal voices, but the collective message of entire species facing extinction. "The tigers say there are only a few thousand of them left," he reported at a UN environmental summit. "They remember when there were hundreds of thousands. They're not just dying, they're watching their entire species disappear, and they know it." The emotional impact of such testimonies, delivered through a child who could genuinely communicate with these creatures, moved even hardened politicians to action. Conservation efforts received unprecedented funding and support, but there were limits to what communication could achieve. One day, Thor came to Arjun with news that shattered the boy's heart. The old German shepherd was dying. His body, already damaged from his time in the fighting ring, was failing. "How long?" Arjun asked, though he could already sense the answer through their connection. "Soon," Thor communicated, not in words but in feelings and images. But not sad, happy, good life after rescue, good boy, good friend. The family rallied around Thor in his final days. Other animals came to pay respects. Street dogs he'd helped, birds he'd never chased, even a few monkeys who'd overcome their instinctive fear of dogs to say goodbye to this exceptional individual. When Thor passed, surrounded by love, Arjun felt the loss not just personally, but through every animal in Mumbai who had known the brave German shepherd. The city's animals observed a moment of silence that evening, no barking or calling, for 1 full minute at sunset. "He's not really gone," Arjun told his grieving parents. "The animals remember him. As long as they remember, a part of him stays alive. And they have very long memories." At Thor's memorial service, hundreds of people and animals gathered. It was the first interspecies funeral in recorded history, with humans and animals equally participating in mourning their shared loss. Margaret, now in her 70s but still documenting everything, asked Arjun what Thor's legacy would be. "He taught us that the divide between human and animal was never real," Arjun said. "We created it in our minds, but hearts always knew better." Thor's legacy is every child who can now hear what animals are saying, every animal that trusts humans again, every moment of understanding between species. As if to emphasize this point, a young street puppy approached Arjun, tail wagging tentatively. The puppy had never met Thor, but somehow knew this boy was safe, was friend, was bridge. Between worlds, Arjun knelt and let the puppy lick his face, feeling in that simple gesture the continuation of everything Thor had started. The connection wasn't broken by death. It was passed on, teacher to student, generation to generation. Years passed. Arjun grew into a young man, his abilities now scientifically documented and studied, but still not fully understood. He established the Thor Foundation, dedicated to teaching interspecies communication and protecting animals worldwide. The Foundation's work went beyond rescue and rehabilitation. They pioneered programs where animals helped solve human problems. Dolphins assisting with ocean cleanup by identifying pollution sources. Pigeons delivering medical supplies to remote areas. Elephants helping reforest damaged lands with their intrinsic understanding of ecosystem balance. But the most revolutionary program was the Children's Council, where young communicators from around the world met monthly to share what animals in their regions were experiencing. These children, connected through their shared ability, formed a network that transcended national boundaries and political divisions. Animals don't care about human borders, Arjun explained at the council's inauguration. A migrating bird doesn't need a passport. A river dolphin doesn't stop at national boundaries. Through them, we learn that we are all part of one system, one planet, one family. The council's first major achievement was exposing an international trafficking ring that had learned to avoid traditional detection methods. But they couldn't hide from animals, and they certainly couldn't hide from children who could understand what those animals had witnessed. As technology advanced, scientists developed devices that could partially replicate what children like Arjun did naturally, translating animal communications into human language. But these machines could only capture the surface layer of meaning, the deep emotional connections, the shared memories, the subtle understanding that passed between conscious beings. These remained the domain of the gifted children. It's not just about translation, Arjun explained to a team of researchers. It's about empathy. You have to feel what they feel, see through their eyes, understand their perspective. Machines can't do that. Only hearts can. This limitation of technology led to a new profession, certified animal communicators, trained from childhood to facilitate understanding between species. These individuals became essential in everything from veterinary care to wildlife management to criminal investigations. One such investigation brought Arjun back to Kerala, to the same jungle where everything had begun. Reports of new trafficking activity had surfaced, someone trying to rebuild what Malhotra had created. Standing in the same clearing where he'd first found Thor, now accompanied by a team of young communicators and their animal partners, Arjun felt the weight of how much had changed. The jungle no longer felt foreign or dangerous. It felt like an extension of himself, every creature a potential ally. The investigation revealed not traffickers, but something more complex. Local villagers capturing animals because their crops were being destroyed, their livelihoods threatened by human-wildlife conflict. It wasn't evil, just desperation. This is the real challenge, Arjun told his team. Not stopping the bad people, that's actually easy once animals can identify them. The hard part is solving the problems that make good people do bad things. They worked with the villagers and animals to establish buffer zones, crops that elephants wouldn't eat, and compensation programs for unavoidable damage. But more importantly, they taught the village children to communicate with the animals, to negotiate rather than retaliate. Within a year, that village became a model for human-wildlife coexistence. Elephants still passed through but followed agreed-upon paths. Monkeys still took some fruit but left designated trees alone. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. Peace between species isn't about separation, Arjun wrote in his book about the experience. It's about communication, compromise, and recognizing that we all have equal right to exist on this planet. The book became required reading in schools worldwide, translated into dozens of languages. But Arjun was proudest of the edition that had no words at all, just pictures and emotions that animals could understand when human children read it to them. As his fame grew, Arjun faced temptations to commercialize his abilities. Entertainment companies wanted him to create shows where animals performed willingly. Military organizations wanted to weaponize animal communication for surveillance and warfare. Corporations wanted to use animals as living sensors for resource extraction. He refused them all, sometimes at great personal cost. There were lawsuits, threats, attempts to discredit him. But always, the animals were watching, protecting, ensuring that their first human friend remained free to continue his work. They offered me $50 million, Arjun told his parents after turning down a particularly lucrative offer. $50 million to teach them how to use dolphins to guard oil rigs. That's a lot of money, Raj said carefully. Thor wouldn't have taken it, Arjun replied simply. And neither will I. His integrity attracted others who felt similarly. Scientists who refused to test on animals, activists who fought against exploitation, children who wanted to use their abilities for good. Together, they formed a movement that transcended traditional environmental or animal welfare organizations. They called it the Consciousness Revolution, the recognition that awareness, feeling, and intelligence existed in many forms, not just human. It challenged fundamental assumptions about humanity's place in the world and our right to dominate other species. Religious leaders struggled with the theological implications. If animals had souls, consciousness, the ability to make moral choices, what did that mean for human spirituality? Some denominations split over the issue, while others embraced it as deepening their understanding of creation. God speaks through all living things, one progressive priest declared. These children are not heretics but prophets, helping us hear the full chorus of creation. But there was backlash too. Industries that depended on animal exploitation fought back with propaganda and lobbying. They claimed communicators were frauds, that giving animals rights would destroy the economy, that human supremacy was natural and necessary. The debate came to a head when a court case challenged whether animals could own property. A dog named Buddy had inherited his human's estate, but relatives contested it, claiming animals couldn't legally own anything. Arjun was called as an expert witness. In a packed courtroom, he facilitated communication between Buddy and the judge, translating the dog's understanding of his human's wishes and his own desires for the property, to turn it into a shelter for abandoned animals. Your Honor, Arjun said, Buddy understands the concept of ownership, of responsibility, of using resources to help others. How is that different from human understanding? The judge's decision was historic. Buddy could inherit with a human trustee to handle paperwork, but with the dog's communicated wishes legally binding, it opened floodgates to animals having legal standing, being able to sue for damages, testify in court through communicators. Not everyone was ready for such radical changes. Some countries banned animal communication as witchcraft or fraud. Others embraced it so fully that they gave animals voting rights in local elections about land use and environmental policy. The world was transforming, sometimes chaotically, into something unprecedented, a truly multi-species society. And at the center of it all was Arjun, now a young adult, but still carrying the wonder of that 5-year-old boy who first heard Thor's call for help. On the 10th anniversary of that first rescue, a celebration was held in Kerala. Thousands attended, humans and animals alike. The old trafficking sites had been converted into rehabilitation centers. The jungle, once a place of fear and exploitation, was now a symbol of cooperation and healing. Arjun stood before the crowd, no longer the small boy who had crawled through sewers to save animals, but a leader of a global movement. Beside him stood not Thor. That loyal friend was gone, but Thor's descendant, a young German shepherd named Hope, who had inherited not just genetics but somehow, mysteriously, some of Thor's memories. 10 years ago, Arjun began, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. A dog asked for help, and a child heard him. That simple moment of connection changed everything, not because I was special, but because I remembered something we'd all forgotten: how to listen. He paused, feeling the attention of every creature present, from the tiniest insect to the elephant standing at the forest edge. We stand now at a crossroads. We can continue the old way, where humans dominate and animals suffer in silence. Or we can choose the new path, where all conscious beings have voice and value. The choice isn't just about animals, it's about what kind of humans we want to be. A murmur ran through the crowd, not just human voices but animal sounds, all expressing agreement, hope, determination. Thor taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action despite fear. Every animal rescued from trafficking, every child who learns to communicate, every moment of understanding between species. These are acts of courage, and they add up to revolution. He looked directly at the cameras, broadcasting his words globally. To those still trapped in cages, literal or metaphorical, know this: you are not forgotten. We hear you. To those who profit from suffering, your time is ending. And to everyone watching, human or animal, you have the power to change the world. You just have to remember how to listen. The crowd erupted in celebration, barking, trumpeting, cheering, singing. It was chaotic and beautiful, a symphony of species united in hope. Later that evening, as the celebration continued, Arjun walked alone to the spot where he'd first found Thor. The clearing was peaceful now, healed from its traumatic past. He sat on a fallen log, and hope settled beside him, so much like Thor it made his heart ache. "Did we do enough?" he asked, not really expecting an answer. But hope turned to look at him, and in those intelligent eyes, Arjun saw something that might have been Thor's spirit, or might have been his imagination, but felt absolutely real. Approval, pride, love. A rustling in the bushes caught his attention. A small figure emerged. A young girl, maybe 4 years old, holding the hand of an even younger boy. Both were from the local village, their clothes simple but clean. "Uncle," the girl said in Malayalam, "we heard you talk to animals. Can you teach us?" Arjun smiled, remembering himself at that age, desperate to understand the voices only he could hear. "I can try, but first, you have to promise something." "What?" the boy asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Promise that you'll use this gift to help, not hurt, to heal, not harm, to bring species together, not drive them apart." Both children nodded solemnly, their small faces serious with the weight of the promise. "Then sit," Arjun said, patting the log beside him. "Close your eyes and listen. Not with your ears, but with your heart. The animals are always talking. We just have to remember how to hear them." As the children settled beside him, hope lying protectively around them, Arjun felt the continuity of purpose. He might have started this revolution, but it would continue long. After he was gone, carried forward by each new generation of children who refused to accept that humans and animals must be forever separated by silence. The jungle around them came alive with evening sounds, birds settling for the night, insects beginning their nocturnal chorus, larger animals moving through the underbrush. To most humans, it was just noise. But to Arjun, and increasingly to these children, it was conversation, community, connection. "I hear something," the girl whispered excitedly. "The birds are saying goodnight to each other." "I hear it too," the boy added, "and there's a mouse looking for food. He's hungry but happy, because he found seeds earlier." Arjun smiled, remembering his own first moments of understanding, the wonder and terror of realizing the world was so much more alive and aware than he'd ever imagined. "That's just the beginning," he told them. "There's so much more to learn." As the stars appeared overhead, the first fireflies of evening began their ancient dance. The children watched in wonder, and Arjun knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, the bridge between species would never be broken again. Too many had crossed it now, in both directions. Hope suddenly stood, alert but not alarmed. Through the trees they could see lights approaching, more villagers, bringing more children, having heard that the famous Arjun was teaching. "Will you help them all?" the girl asked. Arjun thought of Thor, of that first moment of connection in the rain-soaked jungle. He thought of all the animals still suffering, all the children who could help them, if only they knew how. "Yes," he said simply. "All of them. Every child who wants to learn. Every animal who needs a voice. That's what Thor would want. That's what they all want. Just to be heard, to be understood, to matter." The villagers arrived, a crowd of eager faces both young and old. Some were skeptical, others hopeful, all curious about this young man who claimed animals could talk. "Is it real?" one mother asked, holding her daughter's hand. "Can they really communicate?" Instead of answering directly, Arjun gestured to the jungle around them. As if on cue, animals began emerging from the trees. Deer, monkeys, birds, even a shy leopard cat. They arranged themselves in a rough circle around the gathered humans, peaceful despite their natural instincts. Ask them yourself, Arjun said. But remember, you have to listen with more than your ears. You have to listen with everything you are. As the villagers settled down, children in front, adults behind, Arjun began the lesson he'd taught hundreds of times, but which never grew old. He spoke of empathy, of consciousness, of the interconnectedness of all life. He taught them to quiet their minds, to feel rather than think, to open themselves to forms of communication that predated human language by millions of years. And one by one, lights of understanding began dawning in young eyes. A boy gasped as he understood his pet goat's affection for the first time. A girl started crying as she felt the sadness of a caged bird. An elderly woman smiled as she finally understood why cats had always seemed drawn to her. This is how it spreads, Arjun thought, watching the wonder on their faces. Not through force or law or argument, but through experience. Once you've felt another species' consciousness touch yours, you can never go back to believing they're just dumb animals. The session continued late into the night, with more and more villagers arriving as word spread. By dawn, half the village was there, humans and animals together in unprecedented harmony. As the sun rose, painting the jungle canopy gold, Arjun stood to address the crowd one last time. What you've learned tonight is just the beginning. Take it home, practice it, teach others. Every person who learns to communicate with animals makes the world a little more connected, a little more compassionate. You're not just learning a skill, you're part of a revolution in consciousness. An old man raised his hand. But what about those who won't believe, who profit from keeping animals voiceless? They're fighting a losing battle, Arjun replied. Every day more children are born with this ability active. Every day more animals learn that some humans can hear them. The tide has turned. We just have to keep pushing forward. As the crowd began dispersing, returning to their homes with new understanding, the girl who had first approached Arjun tugged at his shirt. "Will you come back?" she asked. "I don't need to," Arjun said, kneeling to her level. "Because you're here now. You and all the others who are learning. You're the future of this movement. I was just the beginning." He stood and looked around at the jungle that had started everything, at the villagers walking home with their children chattering excitedly about the animals they had heard, at Hope sitting patiently beside him. "Thor," he said quietly to the morning air, "we did it. We really did it." A warm breeze rustled through the trees, and for just a moment, Arjun could have sworn he heard a familiar bark of approval echoing from somewhere beyond the physical world. The revolution that started with one boy and one dog had become unstoppable. The world where animals suffered in silence was ending. A new world, where all conscious beings had voice and value, was being born. And in villages and cities across the globe, children were waking up to the voices of animals, ready to continue what Arjun and Thor had started. The bridge between species, once built, could never be destroyed again. The greatest rescue wasn't just saving Thor or exposing Malhotra's trafficking ring. It was rescuing the human capacity for interspecies empathy, buried under centuries of assumption and exploitation, but never truly lost, just waiting for a child's pure heart to remember how to listen. As Arjun walked back toward the resort, Hope at his side and the morning sun warming his face, he felt the presence of thousands of animals worldwide, all connected through the network of understanding he had helped create. They were safe now, or at least safer. They had voices now, and humans who could hear them. The work would never be finished. There would always be those who denied animal consciousness, who profited from exploitation, who resisted change. But they were outnumbered now by children who could hear animals speak, by adults who'd learned to listen, by animals who knew they weren't alone. "This is just the beginning," Arjun said to Hope, who wagged his tail in agreement. "Thor's legacy will outlive us all." And somewhere in Mumbai, in Delhi, in villages across India and beyond, children were sitting with animals, learning the ancient language of consciousness that connected all living things. The revolution Thor had died for was not just surviving, but thriving, spreading from heart to heart, species to species, until the whole world would never be the same. The boy who had once heard a dog crying in the jungle had become a man who had taught the world to listen, and the world, finally, was hearing what the animals had been trying to say all along. We are here, we think, we feel, we matter, and we are not alone. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in the consciousness and value of all living beings, please like, share, and subscribe. Comment below about your own experiences with animals. Have you ever felt like they were trying to tell you something? Share this story with others who need to hear it. Together, we can create a world where no creature suffers in silence, where every voice is heard, where the bridge between species brings us all closer to understanding what it truly means to share this planet. Subscribe for more incredible true stories that will change how you see the world around you.